It all started as a regular late-night appearance. The cameras were rolling, the lights were perfectly set, and the audience was buzzing with anticipation. Meghan Markle, former actress, Duchess of Sussex, and one of the most polarizing public figures in modern media, was seated across from Stephen Colbert, a host known equally for his charm and biting satire. The air was thick, not with tension yet, but with expectation. This was not just a guest appearance. This was an opportunity. For Meghan, it was a chance to set the record straight after months of media speculation. For Colbert, it was a ratings goldmine. And, depending on how the evening went, a moment of comedic brilliance or a PR disaster. Initially, things were lighthearted. Meghan smiled graciously, even laughing at Colbert's opening jabs, which, to his credit, were comparatively gentle. He quipped about the royal family's obsession with protocol and Meghan's decision to break the fourth wall of monarchy tradition. She responded playfully, weaving in subtle digs about her time under the public lens. "I never got a handbook," she said at one point, "but apparently I was supposed to be silent, polite, and perfectly British. I managed 1 out of 3." The crowd laughed, albeit nervously. Colbert leaned in. "Well, some might argue you were never exactly silent," he said with a smirk, tapping his cue cards. Meghan's smile faltered, only slightly, but noticeably. The mood shifted. "You're right," she replied. "I wasn't silent. Silence is what allowed things to get so bad." A beat passed. Colbert nodded slowly. The crowd clapped. But this wasn't the kind of applause that builds momentum. It was the kind that tries to smooth over a bump in the road. Then came the segment that changed everything. In a prearranged bit, Colbert pulled out a segment he called Markle My Words, a faux game in which Meghan was asked to clarify controversial past headlines. It was meant to be playful, but the execution quickly turned aggressive. The first prompt was, "I never wanted to be a royal." Meghan laughed. Out of context. "I never said that." Colbert raised an eyebrow. "But you did say the royal life felt constricting, performative, even toxic." "I said it became toxic," Meghan corrected. "Not that I never wanted it." The back and forth continued, with each prompt digging a little deeper, and with Meghan's responses growing sharper, her tone more clipped. Eventually, Colbert introduced a clip, one not approved by Meghan's team, showing her from a 2019 interview discussing her struggles during her first pregnancy while navigating royal duties. The clip was raw, emotional, and out of sync with the comedic tone of the segment. "You seem very distressed here," Colbert noted, "but some would say that distress came from media pressure, not the institution itself. Isn't it unfair to blame the monarchy for what tabloids did?" And that's when Meghan's composure cracked. She leaned forward, her voice low but clear. "With respect, Stephen, if you think those two are separate, the media and the monarchy, then you haven't been paying attention." The audience went quiet. Colbert, visibly surprised by the intensity of her response, tried to pivot with a joke. "Well, my job is to pay attention just enough to make jokes about it." But Meghan wasn't laughing. "This isn't funny to me," she said. "And honestly, I think it's dangerous when platforms like this treat it like it is." The tension in the room was now unmistakable. Colbert, clearly thrown off his rhythm, fumbled the next question. "So you're saying, just to be clear, that the royal family wanted the media to go after you?" "I'm saying," Meghan replied, "that they did nothing to stop it. And silence, when you have power, is complicity." The crowd murmured. Some applauded. Others sat stiffly, unsure how to react. What happened next was unprecedented for the Late Show. Meghan removed her mic, not dramatically, but deliberately. She stood up, smiled tightly, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity, Stephen." Colbert, caught between confusion and damage control, stood up as well. "Wait, are you leaving?" Meghan nodded. "I think we've said enough tonight." And with that, she walked off stage. The show cut to commercial, but the cameras and the internet were already rolling. Clips flooded social media within minutes. Headlines were drafted before the episode even finished airing. Meghan storms off Colbert. Royal drama goes late night. Markle meltdown or media trap. Within 24 hours, the video had racked up millions of views. Pundits from every side chimed in, some siding with Colbert, calling Meghan overly sensitive or unable to handle satire. Others defended her, arguing that she was ambushed, mocked, and held to an unfair standard. The backlash wasn't limited to online discourse. Colbert's team faced immediate scrutiny. Behind the scenes, producers were grilled over why the controversial clip was aired without Meghan's prior consent, a violation of the usual guest protocol. One staffer, speaking anonymously, admitted, "We thought she could take it. We underestimated how serious she was about controlling her narrative." As for Meghan, she issued a single, pointed statement through her spokesperson the next day. When women speak candidly, they are called emotional. When they set boundaries, they're called difficult. I know exactly what I'm called. I also know exactly who I am. The message was clear. She wasn't backing down, but neither was the storm. In the days that followed, prominent voices weighed in. Journalists debated whether Colbert had crossed a line. Feminists rallied behind Meghan's assertiveness, while satirists defended the show's right to challenge public figures. Then came the inevitable think pieces. The Meghan media problem. Satire in the age of sensitivity. Is late night still safe for women? And yet, amidst all the noise, something deeper was happening. A new narrative was emerging, not about Meghan as a royal, or even as a celebrity, but as a woman trying to reclaim agency in a system built to commodify and critique her every move. Whether she succeeded or stumbled was no longer the point. What mattered was that she refused to play along. Back at the Late Show, Colbert addressed the incident on the following episode. Sitting alone at his desk, he said, "Last night's interview with Meghan Markle didn't go the way we expected. Sometimes, conversations surprise us. Sometimes, they challenge us. And when they do, we need to listen." It wasn't quite an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. And while the media kept spinning, trying to assign winners and losers, Meghan stayed quiet. Not silent, just intentional. Because in a world that profits from women unraveling on camera, walking away was the most radical act she could have done. The fallout from the incident spread like wildfire. As Meghan Markle stormed off the set of The Late Show, the production team stood frozen for several seconds, trying to assess whether this had really just happened. The silence in the studio was palpable. Stephen Colbert, visibly shaken, leaned back in his chair and muttered something under his breath that the microphone didn't quite catch. Then, in his classic pivot, he tried to bring the audience back with a chuckle, tossing a half-hearted joke that nobody really laughed at. The cameras quickly cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Meghan's abrupt exit had sent a shockwave through the entertainment and political spheres alike, and within minutes, it was already trending. Backstage, Meghan's team was swarming. Her publicist was on the phone with multiple networks, strategizing a damage control rollout while also monitoring the reaction online in real time. Meghan, meanwhile, sat silently in the dressing room, legs crossed, jaw clenched. She knew this moment would become a media circus, but she had no regrets. "I'm tired of pretending," she said to her stylist, who looked too stunned to reply. She wasn't just a duchess or an actress anymore. She was a woman who had just set a very public boundary, and that scared people more than she expected. Colbert's producers were divided. Half believed the segment should be edited out of the show entirely, while others insisted that airing it would prove that their show wasn't afraid of real, unfiltered moments. Stephen himself remained quiet in the conversation. He was known for being sharp, witty, and politically incisive, but this was different. This wasn't a politician who flubbed a policy detail or a celebrity caught in a scandal. This was a cultural figurehead who had just exposed the uncomfortable limits of entertainment when it comes at the expense of personal dignity. When the show finally aired later that evening, CBS executives made the decision to keep Meghan's walk-off in the final cut. The clip was framed carefully, with the show returning from commercial break and Stephen offering a diplomatic statement. Sometimes, conversations take turns we don't expect. Tonight was one of those nights. We wish Meghan well. That was it. No apology, no context, just an admission that something unusual had occurred. And that's exactly what made the internet erupt. Social media didn't waste a second. Hashtags like #MeghanWalks and #ColbertExposed were trending globally within hours. Some users praised Meghan's composure and strength, calling her the embodiment of grace under fire. Others mocked her for being too sensitive, accusing her of overreacting to a joke. But as the clip circulated, showing Colbert's smirk and Meghan's visibly narrowing eyes just before she stood up, more and more people began to side with her. It wasn't just a walkout, it was a statement. News outlets jumped on the story with predictable fervor. Fox News ran segments condemning Meghan's diva behavior, while MSNBC analysts commended her for standing up against the late-night machine. Even the New York Times weighed in, describing the moment as a rare example of authentic discomfort being broadcast into American living rooms. On The View, Joy Behar said, "I don't blame her. There's only so many times a woman can be cornered before she walks out." Meghan's team, meanwhile, released a statement the next morning. It read, "The Duchess of Sussex believes in meaningful dialogue, but she will not tolerate disrespect, especially when it's cloaked as comedy. She values her voice and her peace above public approval." That statement alone became its own news cycle. Countless celebrities reposted it with captions like "Queen behavior" and "Respect this woman." Oprah Winfrey reportedly texted Meghan directly, saying she was proud of her. Even Beyoncé's publicist shared the statement with a caption of just 3 words, "We see you." But perhaps the most surprising ripple came from Colbert's own audience. Days after the episode aired, a noticeable drop in ratings was reported for The Late Show. Viewers flooded the show's comment sections and subreddit with frustration, saying they felt Stephen had crossed a line and didn't own up to it properly. One viral post read, "I've been a fan for years, but something about that exchange just didn't sit right. It felt like bullying dressed in sarcasm." Behind closed doors, Stephen Colbert's team began reevaluating their approach. The writers' room held emergency meetings to review how certain segments were crafted, particularly the practice of ambushing guests with uncomfortable archival footage or controversial quotes. There were discussions about incorporating consent policies for guests, allowing them to pre-approve sensitive topics, something that late-night shows had traditionally resisted in the name of spontaneity. For Meghan, though, the experience wasn't just about policy change. It was about legacy. She had long been a lightning rod for criticism, often told to smile more, speak less, and be grateful for the platform she was given. This moment, captured raw, unscripted, and in prime time, had shattered that script. In the days that followed, Meghan stayed mostly silent. She declined interviews. She skipped a high-profile charity event she was scheduled to co-host, sending a video message instead. In the video, she didn't address the Colbert incident directly, but she closed her remarks with a line that felt deliberately pointed. Dignity is not always loud. Sometimes it's just walking away. That clip went viral too, and cemented her walkout as more than a reactive outburst. It was a controlled statement. Still, the controversy refused to die down. Conservative pundits continued to hammer her, using the moment as proof of Hollywood elitism. One anchor said, "She wants the spotlight, but none of the scrutiny." Meghan defenders counted that scrutiny was one thing, exploitation was another. They pointed out the double standard. When male guests walked off talk shows, as Kanye had done, or even Jim Carrey once, it was seen as rebellious or cool. But when Meghan did it, it was scandalous. The conversation quickly evolved from a celebrity spat into a broader cultural reckoning. Women's advocacy groups published essays, hosted panels, and even began using the phrase "pull a Meghan" as shorthand for setting boundaries in toxic spaces. Some critics argued this was overblown, that it was just TV, but others insisted that's exactly why it mattered, because TV is where millions of people form their understanding of what's acceptable behavior. By the second week, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. Parodies of the incident appeared on Saturday Night Live, but even their skit, while humorous, ended with the actress playing Meghan delivering a powerful monologue about reclaiming one's voice. The skit received praise from both liberal and conservative commentators, a rare moment of unity that underscored how deeply this incident had resonated across ideological lines. As for Stephen Colbert, he finally addressed the backlash again in a more somber monologue, saying, "I don't always get it right. That night, maybe I didn't, but I'll keep learning." It was a rare admission, and though some found it insufficient, others appreciated the humility. He didn't invite Meghan back, not yet, but he did vow to examine how humor intersects with harm, a phrase that would later be picked up by numerous journalism students and media critics alike. Back in Montecito, Meghan remained quiet, letting the noise swirl without feeding it. She didn't need to speak. The walk-off had done all the talking she needed. And in doing so, she didn't just control the conversation, she redefined the rules of engagement. The buzz hadn't faded. If anything, it had intensified. Days after the broadcast, Meghan Markle's walk-off from Stephen Colbert's stage had become more than a moment. It had morphed into a symbol. Think pieces flooded the internet, each trying to dissect what her reaction meant for public discourse, celebrity interviews, and the expectations placed on women, particularly women of color, in high-pressure media environments. Yet behind all the speculation, the truth was far less abstract. Meghan had felt cornered, and she had responded not with an outburst, but with decisive silence and action. She walked away, but the world wouldn't let the moment rest. The response from the British press was predictably vicious. Tabloids ran with headlines like "Diva Duchess explodes again" and "Markle meltdown on US TV." The Daily Mail published close-up stills from the moment Meghan stood up, zoomed in on her face with arrows pointing to her frown lines, accusing her of being unable to take a joke. On the flip side, supporters across the globe rallied to defend her. A petition began circulating, demanding Colbert issue a full apology. It gathered over 100,000 signatures within 48 hours. Even international media, from France to South Africa, weighed in. A popular news host in Kenya called her actions the embodiment of quiet protest. A Brazilian YouTuber with millions of followers compared her to Princess Diana, claiming, "She's not the woman the royals wanted. She's the one they feared." The situation escalated further when a leaked clip from backstage began circulating. In the footage, grainy but real, a producer is heard saying, "Why did he go there? We told him not to bring up the Daily Mail lawsuit." The context shocked many. Viewers had assumed Meghan's reaction came from an offhand joke. But if Stephen Colbert had knowingly brought up a legally sensitive issue, one that Meghan had been fighting for years in UK courts, it put her entire response in a new light. Suddenly, the debate wasn't about handling jokes, but about journalistic ethics, boundaries, and weaponized entertainment. Colbert's show tried to get ahead of the storm. A few nights after the clip went viral, he opened the show with a somber tone. He said, "This job is about walking a tightrope between truth, humor, and respect. Last week, we slipped. I slipped." The apology was short but sincere. Still, Meghan remained quiet, allowing public reaction to speak louder than any statement could. Her silence began to hold power, a refusal to feed the media machine that had fed on her for years. The Oprah connection returned in force. Rumors swirled that Meghan was preparing to sit down for another tell-all interview, this time focusing not on the royal family, but on her post-royal life in America, specifically how fame in the U.S. had brought new kinds of exploitation. Oprah's team denied the rumors, but insiders hinted a major media event was being developed. Meanwhile, Meghan was spotted in Montecito walking her dogs with her mother, Doria Ragland, both smiling and wearing baseball caps. The images were clearly taken by paparazzi, but they had an odd calmness to them, like Meghan had already moved past the chaos while the world was still catching up. Back in the entertainment world, celebrities took sides. Jennifer Lawrence posted on Instagram, writing, "There's a difference between being real and being reckless." Meghan chose real. Actor John Boyega tweeted simply, "Protect Meghan at all costs." But it was Viola Davis's interview on The View that truly broke the mold. Davis said, "As Black women, we are taught to endure, to smile, to soften every sharp edge." What Meghan did on that stage, that was not weakness. That was ancestral strength. She walked away like a queen. The studio erupted in applause. Even Whoopi Goldberg, normally reserved in her opinions on Hollywood drama, nodded slowly and said, "That was a power move." The narrative around Meghan began to shift again, this time toward empowerment. Social media lit up with stories from everyday women sharing their own walk-away moments. Teachers quitting toxic schools, nurses refusing to work double shifts with no break, women leaving toxic relationships. Hashtags like #WalkLikeMeghan and #MarkLemmerman began trending globally. Meghan had become, without intending to, a lightning rod for conversations about workplace dignity, personal boundaries, and how far is too far in the name of entertainment. Meanwhile, Stephen Colbert's team was navigating stormy waters. Internal emails were leaked to Rolling Stone showing deep divisions among producers. Some believed the Meghan segment should have been pre-vetted more carefully. Others felt she had overreacted. One producer reportedly wrote, "If we can't ask real questions, what's the point of having guests?" Another fired back, "If real means humiliating them, maybe we've lost the plot." The show began hemorrhaging staff, with 2 senior writers resigning quietly in the weeks that followed. All the while, Meghan's legal team was making quiet moves. Anonymous sources told The Guardian that her attorneys had sent a private letter to CBS demanding internal footage from before and after the segment, including behind-the-scenes audio. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet, but it was a clear sign that Meghan wasn't letting it go. She wanted accountability, and she was using every tool available to her. Prince Harry, though mostly quiet during the ordeal, finally broke his silence during a veterans event in New York. A reporter shouted, "Do you support Meghan's walkout?" Harry didn't flinch. He replied, "She stood up for herself. That's what I love about her." The quote was short but powerful, and it sent social media into another frenzy. Supporters said he was being a protective husband. Critics accused him of enabling diva behavior. But Harry didn't backpedal. In a follow-up interview with GQ, he elaborated, "We were both raised in institutions that teach you to suppress your voice. We spent the last 5 years learning how to use ours." The conversation moved beyond Hollywood. At Columbia University, a sociology professor used the incident as a case study in a graduate seminar on power dynamics in public narratives. At Yale Law School, students hosted a panel titled "Comedy or Coercion? Media Ethics in the Age of Meghan Markle." What had started as a walk-off had become something far more meaningful. It had exposed the razor's edge that women, especially women with public personas, are forced to walk daily. But Meghan, for all the noise, didn't return to the late-night circuit. She declined invitations from Jimmy Fallon, Trevor Noah, and even The Today Show. She was reportedly focused on producing a new documentary for Netflix, this one not about royalty or fame, but about digital harassment and the cost of online narratives. When asked whether the Colbert fallout inspired the project, a rep said, "Her experiences inform everything she does." This moment was no exception. In the background, Colbert's ratings began to stabilize. He brought on more politically neutral guests in the weeks that followed. He addressed the Meghan incident only once more, in a reflective segment about learning from mistakes, and then moved on. But something had changed in the tone of the show. The jokes felt a bit softer, the interviews a bit warmer. Perhaps the shadow of Meghan's walkout still lingered. And Meghan, she returned to public life on her own terms. She gave a TED Talk in London titled The Silence Between Sentences, which focused on the moments people choose to walk away rather than fight. There is strength, she said, not in the volume of your voice, but in your refusal to let it be misused. The talk received a standing ovation, and by the next morning, it had over 30 million views online. This wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a movement. Weeks turned into months, and yet the ripples from Meghan Markle's explosive walk-off on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert continued to be felt across media, politics, and even global cultural discussions. What had seemed like a flashpoint moment, a clash between celebrity dignity and comedic provocation, matured into a sustained reckoning with the structures of entertainment, the media's treatment of women, and the very nature of public identity. Meghan had not said much more after her TED Talk in London, but her silence had evolved from retreat into an undeniable assertion of control. She was no longer reacting to the media storm. She was navigating it. Stephen Colbert, too, had undergone a quiet transformation. His show gradually restructured itself, with the writing room seeing a wave of new hires, including younger, more diverse voices. In a behind-the-scenes profile with The Hollywood Reporter, Colbert acknowledged the moment as a turning point. I realized we were asking questions to get reactions instead of insights. And sometimes, in trying to be sharp, we cut people too deep. He didn't mention Meghan by name, but the subtext was clear to everyone who had followed the story. He also revealed that the show had instituted new policies around guest briefings, making clear what topics would be considered off-limits, a rare nod to the kind of accountability usually absent in the late-night format. Meanwhile, Meghan was curating her comeback. Her documentary, Silenced, The Cost of Speaking, launched on Netflix and shot straight to the top of the platform's global rankings. It was not just a retelling of her own story, although that narrative was woven throughout, but an unflinching look at women who had been publicly shamed, mocked, or silenced after daring to speak their truths. From whistleblowers to TikTok creators, the film resonated widely. One scene in particular went viral, a montage of news hosts, all male, laughing dismissively at women being interrupted or mocked, juxtaposed against statistics on suicide, anxiety, and burnout. The message was chilling. The applause, worldwide. The documentary also included a segment that many viewers immediately recognized as being directly inspired by the Colbert incident. In it, Meghan narrates over footage of herself sitting backstage, eyes closed, breathing deeply. She says, "There's a moment where you realize this isn't about you anymore. You're the mirror they're angry at, not the cause of their anger." That line became a rallying cry. Fans painted murals, sold merch, created sound bites. Mirror Not Cause trended for over a week. As the public embraced Meghan's version of events, the tabloids that once feasted on her every perceived misstep began to lose their grip. Stories about her diva behavior or meltdowns stopped gaining traction. Publications were forced to reconsider the tone and ethics of their coverage. A particularly biting editorial from The Guardian titled, "The Duchess Was Right," sparked conversations in legacy media circles. For too long, it read, "We've confused entertainment with ambush." Meghan Markle did not storm off. She walked out. And in doing so, she walked into history. Yet despite the global support, Meghan wasn't universally celebrated. Predictably, political pundits in conservative circles turned her walkout into fuel for their culture war arguments. On Fox News, Meghan was labeled a symbol of celebrity fragility, with talking heads declaring that, if you can't handle Colbert, how can you handle real life? Meghan never responded directly. Her actions spoke for themselves. She appeared at women's conferences, academic summits, and once even surprised a group of high school students in Los Angeles during a media ethics seminar. Each appearance was controlled, purposeful. She was redefining what media engagement meant on her terms. Prince Harry remained her consistent advocate. The two were seen visiting nonprofits and attending events, no longer running from the spotlight, but carefully using it. Harry later told Time magazine, "We realized that if we can't control the narrative about us, we can at least choose the platform where it's told." He credited the Colbert incident as the spark that made us rewrite our public playbook. One of the most unexpected outcomes of the entire saga came from an unlikely source, Colbert himself. In an anniversary episode marking 10 years of The Late Show, he reflected on career highs and lows. Sometimes, the most painful moments are the ones that teach us the most. There was one moment that changed how I approached this job. I won't name names. She doesn't need me to, but I will say this. When someone walks away from your table, you better ask yourself why they didn't feel safe staying. The audience fell silent, then erupted into applause. Meghan, watching from home according to friends, didn't respond. She didn't need to. The narrative had turned not through statements or tweets, but through the unwavering dignity of a woman who knew her worth. She had refused to be laughed at, cornered, or shamed, and in doing so, had reshaped how audiences expect public figures to be treated. She hadn't lost control of the interview. She had rewritten its ending. Years later, university textbooks would reference the Colbert incident as a case study. Media students would debate whether Colbert's joke crossed a line. Feminist theorists would call Meghan's walk-off a watershed moment in reclaiming narrative space. And yet, for Meghan, the most meaningful change was personal. In a rare interview with Elle, she said, "What people saw was me walking away. What I felt was me walking home, back to myself, my voice, my boundaries." In an age of viral outrage and 15-second headlines, Meghan Markle's exit from Stephen Colbert's stage had become something enduring. Not a scandal, not even a controversy, but a line in the sand, a quiet, powerful refusal. And the world, after laughing, mocking, debating, and finally listening, followed her across it.